morning and welcome to a conversation with the author tonight, courtesy of the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American history and culture. My name is Janae Bolden. I'm an Atlanta journalist, and I'm joined by my good friend, Mario Anthony Reyes, who is the author of A Son with No Father is Like a Book with No Author. I'm sorry, is a book with no author. Thanks for joining us, Mario.
Hey, how you doing?
How are you?
Oh, I feel blessed and highly favored to be here. Thank you kindly.
Congratulations on your book.
Thank you, thank you. It's amazing to see labor of love come to fruition.
And this book, it has, first of all, such a beautiful cover. You have the same artwork behind you.
Yes, actually, a lot of people thought that the artwork was digital. But it's not. It's actually an original painting by Mr. Charlie Palmer, high-end Black artist out of it, headquartered in Atlanta's West End. He recently had Time Cover magazine, and I was fortunate enough to become friends with him and fall under his mentorship. And when I was telling him about the book, he wanted to be involved, and he gave me such amazing content for the book so that way I was able to litter the pages with some real good artwork.
I love it. And I love that it's not just the cover of the book, it's also throughout the book. But if we could just start with the actual title, I think it deserves a little bit more conversation. Why is the book called A Son with No Father is a Book with No Author?
Well, I believe art imitates life and life imitates art. It's a cyclical pattern, right? And I was in Baltimore and my son was real young at the time. And I was sitting there and I watched my barber father give fatherly advice to at least 4 kids that were sitting in his chair. And me and him struck up a conversation with that. And shout out to Bruce Barnett. That was my brother right there. And we struck up a conversation about it. And when I got home, I always got to write a poem after I feel inspired.
Right.
So the poem started, there was a line in the poem that says, "A son with no father is a book with no author. A main character developed by his peers and his barber." So I let that breathe and I was just like, wow, that's like a powerful line. I think it needs more space to breathe. So I wrote a poem entitled "A Son with No Father is a Book with No Author." And I've been getting pushed to put out a actual poetry book for so long. And now, just to be honest, like, I don't really like poetry books. I wanted it to be more of a story. I have a stronger narrative than just random poems. And I decided to, like I said, a labor of love, I decided to take what I feel like I love the most and invest that, which is my parenthood, and apply that to my other talent, which is writing. So I decided to write the book and give that the title. And I know that that's a provocative title. I know it's going to ruffle a couple of feathers. And one of the things I like best is explaining the actual, that metaphor. Now, if I was to give you a raisin in the sun, but it was from an anonymous author, is it still a masterpiece?
I mean, I guess I would have to read it to know if it's a masterpiece, right?
You never read Raisin in the Sun?
Of course, but I'm saying you said like anonymous author though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, A Son with No Father is a book with no author. The book is still written.
Oh, right. Yes.
So the content is still the same. It's a masterpiece is a masterpiece. Exactly.
I misunderstood your question.
It's a masterpiece whether you know who wrote it or not. The only difference is it may not have a table of context. It may not have a preface. And those things matter as I go to navigate a book and for our children's life.
I thought it was interesting, one thing you just said about not really liking poetry books. You're a poet who doesn't like poetry books. And this book has poems throughout, but you wouldn't necessarily, so I'm guessing you wouldn't call your book a poetry book. It's something in between. There's essays, there's conversation pieces.
It's a true hybrid.
Describe it.
It's a true hybrid.
Hybrid, okay.
One of my favorite books was 48 Laws of Power. and I'm not sure, like I read it when I was in the Air Force, and I was about to actually get kicked out of the Air Force. And I read that book, and I started applying a law each day, you know, and it allowed me to navigate the waters that I created, and I was able to stay in. And it was a good read for me because of the format of it. It gives you the law, the interpretation of the law, the reversal of the law, and how to protect yourself.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, that's for somebody that likes logic and stories, you getting fed from both angles. So I figured my book being on how I like to, as a poet, I automatically write. So I could add that as a dimension of the book. Sharing the narrative between my son and I gives people a story-like feel to each chapter. And then in the portions that have the lesson, that is me almost sitting down with you, giving you my logic as to why I respond a certain way, why I parent the way that I do. And this is all meant to be honest. Like, it's not perfect. There's plenty of times in the book where I admit that I think
you say that a lot. You actually, throughout the book, you often say, you know, I'm not perfect, but I am who I am, and this is just me. I think that actually, I think most parents would say, you know, everyone parents differently. So I think that that's a great approach to take in the book. For someone who was picking up the book, would you say it's a great book for kids or a great book for parents, or something that parents and kids should read together?
Yes, I think it's a book that, well, just for what you just said, I think the reason why I said it is I want to be humanized.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of times when you're on stage and you're performing, people assume that you have figured it out, and that's why you're sharing said poem.
Because you're the expert.
You're the alleged expert.
Right.
But there's no such thing as being an expert parent. So I wanted not just the parents to know, but also the children to know that we are all flawed human beings, and our intentions may be in the right place, but our actions and our lessons may not be on par with that. And that actually speaks to what you just asked as far as who's the book written for. It's written for, honestly, I really went into it with the thought of a single mother could read this book and gain insight as to how a father would respond. After writing it, a lot of fathers started gravitating to it because they were able to, it was like a conversation with a good friend on subjects that they may necessarily bring up. So they could say, okay, I've actually dealt with this, or I could see this happening in my fatherhood journey. It's good to see how another father dealt with it. And then, just to be honest, like when I'm doing the workshops, the kids gravitate to the book just as much because they want to understand okay, like I'll give you an example. So there's a chapter in there about sexuality, and that wasn't talked about when I was growing up.
Right.
Preferences in sexuality weren't talked about when I was growing up. So for the kids to sit there with their father and read that chapter and then have an open dialogue and understand that they need to cherish their bodies just as much as the young ladies that they may be interested in is a whole nother dynamic now.
Right. Now, you mentioned another thing that you mentioned that you were in the barbershop, you had an idea for this poem, you went home and wrote the poem. Was that the case? Like, did you just, when it came to writing this book, you had the idea for the book? How much of the poetry already existed and how much did you have to do from scratch? Like, how long did it take you to write the book?
Oh, the book, the process from inception of the idea to, you know, the labor of it, the editing of it, the art of it, the rewriting, because, you know, the editing process is long. This took easily 6-7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like, if you notice that you almost get the journey of my son, MJ, because when we start, he's a little boy in the youth chapter.
Like 4 years old.
Yeah, he's 4 years old. He's 13 now.
Yeah.
So you get to see almost, and I'm writing as the years are progressing. So I didn't just sit down and write all the chapters because I didn't know the subjects I wanted to tackle until, like, I would have never knew the sexuality chapter was important until he asked me that question in 3rd grade. It wasn't until he was getting bullied in the 5th grade that I realized it was important for me to address that as well. So now I just felt like it would, honestly, I was forced to complete the book. Because you become a better writer in the process. And then something else happens and you're like, oh, I should add that as well. And I was like, you know what, Mario, seal it. It is what it is. It's an honest work. It's an honest, simple way for people to digest what it is you're going through and what you've gone through. So submit it. And it was, sheesh, the editing itself added probably another 40 pages to the book.
Okay. So 6 or 7 years to write. Now, identity is such a huge part of this book. I think, your identity being from the Bronx, being Puerto Rican, your family ties, your military experience, all of that goes into this book. You mention all of these details. A lot of them keep coming up over and over, especially your Puerto Rican heritage. But you do speak about raising a Black son. So your son identifies as Black, you identify as Puerto Rican. How has that journey been? And what have been the challenges raising a Black son as a Latino?
Okay, that's a fair question. And I just feel like I'm in a very unique disposition because I identify as a Black Puerto Rican.
Okay.
So Afro Boricua, Afro Latino. So these are nuances that weren't familiar when I was growing up.
Okay.
And it's funny. I remember in 6th grade, my boy Ahuma, it was Black History Month, and I was like, Mr. Fleisch used to give us candy if we answered questions. So I'm answering all the questions about like Black History Month, and Ahuma's like, "Yo, stop answering all the questions. You ain't even Black." And I was like, bro, come on, where's the love? But also my godfathers truly let me know who I am. So in one capacity, I had a godfather who is a direct descendant of the dude that abolished slavery in Puerto Rico. And at first glance, he is as Black as any other person I've ever met, like, skin-wise, color-wise. And then I have another godfather who is a foremost collector of slave artifacts from Puerto Rico. So I always felt like I knew how much Black history and African ancestry goes into my lineage and to who I am. As you said, identity narratives are very important. So I'm very confident in that. So I never looked at raising my son as a Black son as a challenge because I always felt like I was able to empathize and relate to these struggles being from a predominantly Jamaican and ethnic community.
Right. So when you're raising your son, does he identify as Afro-Puerto Rican as well?
That's a good question. I've never asked him what he identifies as. I know he always says like it's almost like a stew, right? So, a Jamaican may add curry to their stew. Mm-hmm. A Puerto Rican may add sofrito to their stew, but it's still a stew.
Right.
The base ingredients are the same. So I know he references his Puerto Rican ethnicity a lot, his culture a lot, but he also I think he definitely identifies as a young Black boy.
Okay. Speaking of which, happy Black History Month.
Hey.
There is, parts of the book, you break the chapters down by different subjects. And yes, you have a chapter here about race. You get into Trayvon Martin, you get into some really heavy things that have happened historically. Can we talk about that a little bit? Like, Why was it important to include that conversation about race parts specifically? Because I know there's a lot of different subjects you talk about, but I know your son, you know, he's 13 now. Obviously, that's an age where you really want to be talking to kids about how vulnerable they are because of their skin color.
Very
But
much.
from what I read in the book, you've been talking to him about it his whole life.
Mm.
How hard was it writing this chapter?
Oh man, that's one of the chapters that was written almost when it happened. And I had to write myself in the confusion I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Trayvon Martin just happened. I'm volunteering in Baltimore. We're working. We was on the heels of Freddie Gray was about to happen. It was just a lot going on. And when there's not like what they say, honesty comes out the mouth for babes. You know, a child, you're not gonna get a more honest answer or question than from a child.
Right.
And when we walked out of the bank that day that inspired this chapter, and across the street was a building, and every window had a placard in red, bright blood red, that said, "America, stop killing Black men." Mm-hmm. And he looks at me and he goes, "Daddy, why do they want to kill us?" Now, just paying attention to his words, he killed us. So he didn't see any difference between him being a traditional Black child and then me being a Puerto Rican father. That was the first thing I took from it. So I, again, assumed that role as an Afro or a Black father, even though I might have a little different ethnicity to me. Secondly, I didn't know how much I wanted to say. Like, he's a blank page at this point. I want him to enjoy all the ignorance that comes with youth. I wanted him to truly just write his own story, but I did feel like I would be doing a disservice if I did not prepare him and educate him onto the historical issues, the systematic issues. But you don't want to crush the 7-year-old's perception of society. You know, at that point, he was still, when he played Cops and Robbers, he probably wanted to be the cop, you know? So these are, and that's what the poem in that one was, just me wrestling with how I want to raise him. Do I want to project all of the experiences that happened to me right onto him? Right. And say, now you got to carry that load, but your shoulders aren't big enough to bear them? Or, you know, do I want to soften the blow? And his mother and I sat with him and had long conversations with him, explaining to him how important it is for us as parents to lead him as those questions emerge. So we gave him just enough to understand you're special, but certain people may look at you different, not from a good perspective. And and you know, you can't really shelter kids from the internet now. So as he's receiving all this information, I know he's gonna have more questions.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Do you have a favorite chapter?
Right now, my favorite chapter changes. You know what I'm saying? Like, there might have been a point where like family was my favorite chapter because, you know, I was in my bag missing my sister. But right now, I would specifically say my favorite chapter is youth. Because even he's recognizing at 13 that it's almost over. That I got 5 years left and I got to figure out what college I want to go to, what I want to do with my life. Like, you know, not to throw him under the bus, but like his little hairs are starting to come right here and whatnot. So now he's like,
he's gonna kill you.
Yeah, he's feeling himself, but he's also like, this is different. And it's funny for me because I'm looking at his shoulders, you know, and he's getting those square basketball man shoulders. And I'm like, damn, like, you want to lay on me and watch TV to watch the movie today? And he's like, come on, I'm almost your size. And just as a parent, it really puts in perspective how fleeting their youth is and how fast time goes. Oh my God. If there was a pause button or a rewind button, I would play with it all day.
Uh-oh. Yeah, we don't need that. I think everyone would probably manipulate those type of buttons. Time would be all out of whack. We would all be in different time periods.
Right.
It would be disastrous.
But it's really like exciting to see also because, you know, if you being present or the whole process kind of makes you excited to see what's about to come next. You know what I mean? Like he had like a football phase, he had a basketball phase, he had a boxing phase. Right. Now he's on a skateboarding and like he's working on his own company. I bought him a company for his birthday last year. Like and he's coming. Yes. And he's opening up his own line, his own brand about anti-bullying campaign and his own comic book, and he has his own character. So watching him emerge into his own person is I want to say better than watching him as a child, but you just can't replace the innocence and duplicate that energy ever.
I want to ask you how your daughter felt about this book, because she's not left out of it, but MJ is really like front and center. He's on the cover with you. He in the artwork throughout the book. Most of the stories are centered around fathering a son. There are definitely situations that you mention your daughter, especially you mention her a lot in the relationship between her and your son. Yes. Their relationship is front and center quite a bit throughout the book. But was there ever a point where she said, "Papi, next book, when is the next book? Because I need to be on the front."
It's funny, she's never vocalized it, but I'm cognizant of it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just a matter of he was born first. So you just go through more with the first one, and then you clean it up on the second one. You know, like, I messed up this time, I didn't get it right the second time. But she is well aware that I'm in the process of writing her book. And with her book, it's going to be structured not similar in that it's going to be based upon subject, but she's like a muse. So one of the things I say in the book is I call my kids pride and joy. Nobody can make a man more proud than his son. That's his namesake, that's his little man and all of that, right? But nobody makes a man happier than baby girl.
Right.
So as a man that writes, it's easy to talk about my pride when I write. It's harder to talk about my vulnerabilities. And your daughter's your most vulnerable place as a father, But I communicate to her a lot. And I think she's enjoying watching the process of being an independent author and understanding what it's like to be industrious on your own accord. So me and her was sitting down when I was drawing a picture, and she got to watch the process or go and see what it's like how we order books and things of that nature. So she's definitely front and center, and she's also a lot more shy than my son. So when her book comes out, I don't think she's going to want to be as hands-on as MJ has been.
How has MJ been hands-on?
He wants to be in every video. He wants to be all in the videos. He's like the Puff Daddy of this energy and this thing we created.
He's the Puff Daddy of sons.
Yeah, he's over here dancing in the background in the last video I just did. He was in there running, him and his best friend Jace. They're getting busy. But he's like, he really enjoys being. What he really enjoys being present at the shows. Which obviously, because of COVID, we haven't been able to do for a while. Right. But the shows is when he's like, I see that twinkle in his eye that I won't see in the house. And as I said, like, even during the process that my daughter's sitting with us, he makes sure like he's helping put things in perspective for her sometimes as the older brother. Like, oh, this is why daddy did it this way. You know what I mean? So I like, everything in my house is like a group project. So that makes it more fun and keeps them busy. while I'm doing all of these projects that my crazy self comes up with.
I also wanted to ask you about just the struggle as artists. You know, so many of us are balancing our personal art with whatever the 9 to 5 may be, or whatever else we have to use to supplement our income to do our art. Can you
Yes.
talk about that struggle some, like finding that balance and also making time to write a book when you're, you know, also working?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I got on a contract about 7 to 8 years ago. And at that time, you had to be on site all the time. I told them I was moving to Atlanta from Baltimore, and they allowed me to work remotely back then. So this is like 2014. I'm working remote. And because I was working remote, I always made sure they knew that I was available. So they were calling me a lot. And when you do that, you gain some level of equity and trust. So I'm very fortunate in that, like, me being like, I'm the guy that will bring his laptop to a open mic, be at my table, running commands, troubleshooting and doing what I got to do, go up on stage, perform, and come back and finish working.
Wow.
Yeah, like, you know, so I look like, if you don't know no better, I look like I'm the most interesting man in the world. I look like a spy and shit, right? But like I said, like, I'm just fortunate in that. And then even the people on the contract management, they got wind of what I was doing, because I try to keep those things separate. And then they saw the message, and they've been very, very supportive, very supportive. And they're actually about to highlight the book themselves on the corporate website. So, you know, when you have that level of support from both, you know, your artistic a network and your professional network, that is honestly the best feeling in the world.
And since we're talking about support, I also wanted to mention your ex-wife, because she's mentioned in the book quite a bit, all positive. You seem to have the best co-parenting relationship that I have ever witnessed. Uh, you know, just in my knowing you, and also reading this book, you
Mhm.
see parents who are really lovingly co-parenting, bringing up their children together, consulting with each other about decisions that have to be made in their children's lives. How much easier did that make writing this book?
Um, Very easy. There's a lyric I got in a poem that says, "Love doesn't have to live in the same crib when you're able to use those children as the bridge." And even when we decided to part ways romantically, we understood that we're going to have a tie together for the rest of our lives in these children. And since the children is center to both of our lives,
Mm-hmm.
the issues stopped being about us, and now they're only about them. So I made sure, even when I was done with when I finally got done editing it, I gave it to her, and I was like, hey, just so we're on the same accord, if there's anything in here that you feel is I'm sharing too much or is going above and beyond, let me know. And I just think it's all a matter of consideration. You know, the same way I'm considerate to my children's feelings and what they need to feel secure, I have to make sure I honor our agreement in that same accord. So thankfully, she's been super supportive. You know what I mean? Like, she's came out to some of the workshops and spoke to the kids from a judicial standpoint, since she's a lawyer, giving them understanding how to interact with police, you know, and I'm just fortunate in that that's their example. And they, like, that's the example we're setting for them. You know what I'm saying?
Since you mentioned the workshops a few times, can you tell the audience a little bit more about the workbook that you created in conjunction with
Oh,
the
for
book,
sure.
and also
So
workshops that you've been doing?
yes, the workbook itself is I got with Ms. Angela Miles of the Gathering Spot. Well, she's not of the Gathering Spot, but we were friends from the Gathering Spot. And she's a child speech pathologist, and we worked with other people that were giving us input using Maslow's hierarchy of needs to create questionnaires for children to ask their parents and parents to ask their children to help facilitate their the communication, to just make it easier. And thankfully, you could use the book as a sounding board. So now, as a parent, it's kind of hard to breach certain topics of conversations with your children. So instead, we said, okay, use what me and MJ went through to help you and your child have easier dialogue.
Gotcha.
So in that, we created the workbook. I created the workshop called Kingdom Sons from that template. And we meet for 8 weeks. And we've been doing it here in Atlanta in the gathering spot, but I think I'm gonna take it online to make it a virtual experience as well. So father figures and children come. And when I say father figure, honestly, any adult figure, you don't have to be a dad, it could be your mom too. You come and we sit down and we talk about things specific to raising sons. So we talk about how to be like, where does masculinity and emotion collide, or does it? Right. In manhood, are you allowed to cry? And things of that nature, things that you don't really get in popular conversation. When we talk about race and we do almost like acts. So I'll act like I'm a police officer talking to the children, and the children will respond, and I'll say, okay, this is where you would have been wrong with this. These are what your rights are. These are actual ways in which you could respond to the police that they will legally have to abide by. You know what I mean? So every single day or event of the workshop is going to have a different tonage, but it always starts with a prayer, always starts with saging, and it's all anchored in healthy dialogue. I'm not here to only speak to you. This is a duplex environment. I want to get all the input from not only the kids, but the parents as well. And in that, we became a true village. And I tried to start one for winter, but I know the last one we held outside, and I didn't want to be responsible in case anything went wrong due to the pandemic that's going on right now. So I want people to go on my website and register for the next one as it comes up, get the book, so that way we could really like tune in and broaden this amazing village of ours.
Okay, so I want to get into some of the things that I saw in the book. Like, one thing that stood out was the masculinity. There's a lot being made now about toxic masculinity. We're raising our sons very differently. And one thing that's really interesting to me, like at least the portrait that you paint of MJ, he is very sensitive. He's sensitive. He is, he specifically in one part of the book, the bullying chapter, he's like, Dad, I'm not like you. It seems that his perception of you is that you are hyper masculine, that you are gangster, to use his words.
Yeah.
And you expressed how taken aback you were at being described in this way, because your perception of yourself was that you're actually, very intellectual, you're a poet, obviously, so you're cultured. You're not like the average quote unquote, masculine man, like the knucklehead or whatever. So, I wanted to get into that a little bit, raising sons that aren't stereotypically, the stereotype of what masculine is. Like, how has that been, that journey for you?
So the interesting part about that is like my mother says it all the time. Everybody sees it in MJ, in that he is me.
Okay.
At the same age, I was the exact same way. I was a very sensitive child. Anybody that's watching that went to school with me knows I was very. I wasn't the gangster growing up. I was a class clown all day. You know what I mean? And it was just going through the experiences of life you know, whether it be in the Bronx or in the military or whatever, you know, it hardens your shell. So, because I'm not going to back down from a conflict, it may seem like I welcome it in his perspective, from his perspective. And one of the things that we speak about in the workshop that I would like to make present here is that at some point you have to put a period where a comma used to be. And in that, I remember my dad always telling me, not that it was without malicious intent, but because he was preparing me with the toolkit that he had available. So he's telling me, men don't cry, men don't cry, men don't cry. So eventually you hear that shit enough, or if you start crying and, you know, you get the tate quieto in your head, it doesn't.
Wait, what did he hit you with?
The, you know, like the little, it's a Spanish euphemism, pardon me. You know what I mean?
Again, Mario?
The tate quieto.
Tate quieto.
Yeah. So, like, you know, going through that, it used to catch me off guard because I used to feel like, damn, like, I'm not making him proud. I'm not living up to his expectations. And that caused a rift between us. And I didn't want that, and I don't want that for my son. I want him to be a whole human being. Like, it's very bad when you can only be one part of yourself to the person that allegedly loves you the most. And in the event that he's not able to show me all dimensions of him, he's going to start hiding them. And then he's going to create this alternate persona. And it's going to be hard to parent that, right? So I think that that chapter for me, and that specific story, was a mirror held up to me. Again, honesty comes out the mouth of babes. And him saying that, and I had to look at myself like, your kids don't listen to what you say, they duplicate what you do. So you have to start being more empathetic. You can't only show Amaya favor and love in that particular way. You have to also let MJ recognize that you also are a whole human being. You also cry as a man. You also feel strongly and deeply, and you're sensitive to certain topics, because if not, I don't want him to walk around ill-prepared for the people that he's going to encounter in life.
Yeah, for sure. Now, another part of that chapter that for me, I was like, people would probably be divided about is, I think parents, we all, like all parents, you know, when they hear their kid talk about a bully, you know, they feel protective. Some of them might go so far as to try to confront the bully or talk to these parents. Your advice is very clear to MJ. You want him to stand up for himself, make sure that he's respected, even if that he has to get physical. And you know, you let him know you're not going to be in trouble if you do that. Did you have any conflict about giving that advice? I feel like every parent probably would, just because, you know, we're walking a very you know, times have changed. We're walking a delicate balance, and you know, people have a much different approach these days when it comes to getting physical, period.
Well, you know how, like, there's always a disclaimer at the beginning of a movie or a TV show, or you got the advice, explicit content warning on the CD or whatever. At the beginning of my book, I say, you know, this is from my perspective.
Right.
If you don't agree with it, that's fine. Refine it so it makes sense for you. So even when you address that part of the book in the workbook, did you ever get approached as a bully like MJ did? How would you have handled it? What do you think about what Mr. Mario said?
Right.
That is your opportunity as a parent to take hold and say, I do not agree with what he said.
Right.
However, for me, I've learned traveling internationally, spending time abroad in Europe and Asia, you know, South America, and I recently literally drove 8,000 miles around the country and stood in almost every state in the continental US. You will be a citizen of the world as long as you can hold your square down. Because the world, as empathetic as you may be, they may not. But people always respect strength. So make sure you let yourself be known and your strength be known. Don't go looking for trouble, but if it comes, be prepared to handle it. Hence why he was in boxing. Hence why he was in MMA and things of that nature, because I want him to be prepared for the inevitable. Like, I wish I could say I went this whole life without ever getting into a fight, but Lord knows I lost and won some, so we're good.
That's good. And I thought
which part is good, losing or winning?
That you're at peace either way. You know you've won some and you know you've lost some, but you're gonna still make sure you get your respect either way.
You know, and we all had a bully in school. We all had a bully in class. Like, but if you don't approach it, you're gonna get your money taken every day.
Yeah. No, I thought that part was good advice. I am about to open it up for audience questions. I did want to ask you before I get to that point, what is next for you? What is next for you on this journey with this book, your journey as a poet, as a father?
Oh, well, we're having, like I said, we're working on a Myers book right now. It's called Hurricane Her. And because my daughter, when she came in, like, she just wiped away everything I thought I knew about myself and the world at large. So, you know, that's definitely in the works. You can see that within the next year. As far as the book is concerned, we have an amazing score coming out, produced by Milk and Sis, Grammy Award winning. Yes, like, so a lot of the poems that you see in the book have been transformed into acoustic poetry songs. And I recently got the master back, and I promise you, it's my own lane. I've never heard nothing like this before. I've heard poetry and music, and it didn't hit the same as it does on stage. It's not rap. It's entirely unique sound, and I'm in love with what we created. Aside from that, we're going to be touring once the world opens back up. And we're going to be hosting 2 workshops. We're going to be doing Poetry to the People, which is a kids poetry workshop that we did last year at the beginning of COVID. We're going to start that in April for Poetry Month. And we're going to start doing Kingdom Sun again once it warms up and we could go outside. And I want to host the next Kingdom Sun for fatherless children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm going to get a group of guys that are looking to do mentorship. So that way we could pair them as well.
Is there a specific group of children that fit that demo that you have already come into contact? Is that why you are creating this specific?
Well, I've been getting a request a lot.
Okay.
You know, a lot of, especially because the title of the book kind of draws in people who are wrestling with that issue. It doesn't make sense for me to only cater to those that have their fathers present. So, you know, a lot of times, what I noticed also at the last workshop, a lot of the fathers are willing to extend themselves to the kids that don't have fathers. They see what the value is in their own children's lives.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that, and once you have one, if you have 2, 3, 4, like, it's all the same at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just another mouth and some more love that to give out. Love is one of those things that you don't have to ration it. You could keep giving it out in abundance and never have to feel self-conscious about it. So I really want to cater to those children, because I feel like those children, not just because they're at risk and all the statistics that are behind not having a father, I want them to get some of that love, yo. Come get some of this. You know what I mean?
That's great. No, you got a lot of love to give. So, as I said, I am opening up for folks that have questions. If you have questions, raise your hand. The facilitator will take your question and send it to me or bring you in if possible. The first question is actually, Mario, if you could speak about your relationship with your father and how that shaped this experience.
Well, I have, like, now I have an amazing relationship with my father, but there was that, like, 15 till about 22, so about 7 years of contention.
Oh, wow.
And I realize now how ungrateful I was. because from 0
You
through
have a better
14,
perspective now.
yeah, from 0 through 15, he was the bee's knees. You know, we used to go bike riding, you know, but it also like, I wasn't the easiest kid to parent, always in trouble at school for something, for like, and not for like malicious things. I was just mischievous. So my dad is of the old school, whatchamacallit, like that culture where they tighten you up the way they know how to. You know, my mother tried to protect me as much as possible, but them ass whoopers came.
Right.
So I think at 15, I started to rebel. And I remember I was playing spades in Korea with some of my boys. And we just got into like a rumble at a club or whatever. And we were all talking about like our gangster stories. And they were all talking about how they didn't have any like leadership growing up and no fathers, and like the streets raised them. And I was like, well, me and my parents used to go to the Poconos and Niagara Falls and Puerto Rico. We went on family trips. And they're like, so why are you like this? And I was like, probably my own insecurities. You know, we got to be real, right? My insecurities. So I called my dad that night. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning in the US. And I just apologized to him. And I think that was the first step in reconciliation. Because when I came home, we went fishing and he looked me in my eyes and told me that he could pass away today proud because he knows he finally raised a man.
Wow.
Yeah, that was an emotional moment for me.
And you were in the Air Force?
Oh yeah, I was still in the Air Force at that time. I was stationed at NSA.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the next question is actually about that. The audience members asking what you gained or lost from your military experience.
Oh, I gained education. That's for damn sure. I graduated. Me and my daughter was looking through my high school transcripts. It's so embarrassing. I graduated with a 67 average. Like, and between you and I, and don't tell nobody else, my math teacher knew that I was going to have to redo 12th grade, and he changed my grade from a 63 to a 68 because he knew I was going to the Air Force.
Okay.
So Mr. Katzenberg, thank you very much for that. Because I did it, because that became, my school became a war zone. So that's one thing I gained. I gained the education. I learned everything about technology back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it's been able to provide a very nice lifestyle for me and my children, and I'm grateful for that. What it took from me is, I don't want to say my humanity, like I can't say humanity, but I would say it made me very numb to certain things that go on in the world. I don't value life the same, just to be honest. I'm currently in therapy for PTSD.
Wow.
It's something that I chose, that people that are close to me, like my girlfriend, it was thankfully through her and her family, they kind of like, they spoke to me the right way to make me want to pursue that healing journey. And it was very hard for me to swallow my pride and do that. But a year and a half later is probably the most healthy thing I've done in a very long time.
Nice. Let me see.
Any more questions?
That was the last question that I received. Let me double check and make sure there's not any more. We're doing good on time.
Oh, awesome. It feels this is a great, I'm gonna need you to interview me more often.
I'm gonna start charging.
Hey, I'm here for it.
Okay, this question is about your influences. Who are your influences, both personal and artistic?
I'll start with artistic. Artistic, I will go with Gil Scott Heron as from poetry. He's the GOAT to me. I love him. Nas is, I love storytellers. So like Slick Rick, Biggie, Nas. Jay-Z gets busy when he chooses to tell a story. I like the jewels that he drops though. Like what Jay does, he's like the king of entendres. So you could go back and always pick up something new from what he said. So artistically, I would say, and Lauryn Hill, pardon me, can't forget the incomparable Lauryn.
Thank you. Yes.
No, manifest all day. That's my heart. Personally, I had a ton of influences. Shout out to everybody from Q4 Co-op City. My entire block raised me, and they did a great job. So that would be my sister Tiana, Sammy, the best storyteller I've ever met, the funniest dude I ever met. All my boys, you know, Rob, Chip Chase, Ajne, all of them. Then my cousins. I got a huge family. My mother got 17 brothers and sisters. So there's like a little Puerto Rican army behind me. And my oldest cousin, Macho, he's always been at the helm. And then it's funny how like even the youngest inspire me now. So like my younger cousin, Jonathan, and my god brother, Jason, we all feed off of each other. You feel me?
Absolutely. So I have a request for you.
Uh-oh.
Do you think you could close out this evening by doing a poem for us?
Of course. I'll actually do the title poem for the book, A Son with No Father.
Perfect.
All right. When I say, hey, yo, what are you supposed to say, Janae? There we go. See? You've been to enough performances to know that. I know that for sure. All right. Hey, yo. A Son with No Father is a book with no author. A main character that's been developed by his peers and his barber. Lost in the pages, wondering if his features reflect that of the artist, but he can't tell. Because tears blurry his vision that chased his birthday cake when he just needed to be watered. A son with no father is a plant with no light. A seed trying desperately to bud with all of its might, hoping to bloom in spite of the gloom that he faces every night when he just needed you there to read him a sweet lullaby. A son with no father is a player with no coach, a slave with no hope, a burning desire for freedom, but the longing for his dad only keeps him dangling from that rope when he just needed you there to keep your promises. A son with no father is left with women that eat their young, forced to feed on that boy's masculinity until he thinks he's one of them. Lost in pop culture, trying to discover his identity with no place to learn it from when he just needed you there, king, to set the example. You see, he needed that balance. That boy needs both of his parents. He did nothing to deserve being abandoned and would rather walk in his father's shadow, but in that man's absence, it's this little boy that has to be the one to cast it. His imagination holds the graphic of the perfect dad captured, a slave to an image that will never be mastered. There is no hand to craft it. There is no magic in rabbit. There's no one to show him how to hold the bat at baseball practice. Remember, you keep your back elbow up and always keep your eye on the ball. There's no one to show him how to throw his hands so he doesn't get his ass kicked. Remember, always keep your guard up, tuck your chin, and you punch across the middle. There's no one to point out a good woman or the definition of what a good asset is. Now, for this, Papi, I think we should take a walk together. No one to share an adventure in all things that are man-ish. Mommy can try, but she cannot be all the things that this man is. You see, her role is just as important, to provide him with balance and order. But a son with no father is haunted by the thoughts of being fostered, hoping that he could protect his future son and daughter from all of the lessons that your absence taught him. Have you ever tried to read a book that's missing an introduction? No preface to prepare that youngin' for what's coming? Yet, the numbing effects of your absence creates a heartless dummy that walks around town with that 4 pound and finds everything funny. Now I don't think you do, money, because you fail to realize that a son with no father is much, much more than a book with no author or a boy with no dad. He is the Immaculate Conception. I call him a young God because you are just that boy's sperm donor. Painfully obvious that you are no man. Now, a son with no father is out here looking for the words to complete his story in the absence of its author. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario.
Janae, thank you so much. I appreciate you sincerely.
And I thank everyone who joined us this evening. It's been a conversation with Mario Reyes, AKA Papi Picasso.
I would like everybody to know that you could, if you haven't yet purchased the book, you could get it at www.papipicassopoetry.com. My Instagram is I am Papi Picasso if you'd like to follow me on social media, or Papi Picasso Poetry on Facebook, and all roads will lead you to the links necessary to get this book and invest in the future of communication for the next generation.
Thank you, Mario. And thanks to Auburn Avenue Research Library.